All right, so this is my new Raspberry Pi DNS DHCP server that I'm about to set up. So this is an old Raspberry Pi. It's the Raspberry Pi 2 Model B version 1.1. I had this sitting in my closet, and I'm planning to set up a separate DNS and DHCP server so I don't run it off my desktop for all my labs. For all my VMware and Proxmox VMs and whatever else on my network. So I'm setting up a separate server for this, and so this thing is going to live in my closet right next to my new Raspberry Pi firewall router. Stay tuned. So I'm going to set this guy up first, and then I'm going to set up the new firewall router. I already have a existing Raspberry Pi firewall router. You might want to check that video out. I already have that posted from a while back, but I'm going to be posting a new, better one coming up really soon after this video. So stay tuned for that also. Might want to hit the subscribe button. I'm going to show you the config for this after I'm going to actually install this and set it up and stick it in my closet, and then I'll show you the actual config for this and how I set it up. But it's pretty easy, but I'm going to go through that, and I'll check the link in the description for additional details on this. But yeah, you might want to hit that subscribe button, hit the little bell icon so you don't miss anything. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. But let's switch over to the part where I show you the configuration right now. All right, so let's go over the actual configuration for my Raspberry Pi DNS and DHCP server. So yeah, I installed ISC DHCP and also Bind 9. Anyways, to start out, I actually had to. So I wrote Raspberry Pi OS to the SD card and got the Raspberry Pi up and running. That's kind of out of scope for what I wanted to cover in this video. But anyways, one of the first things I needed to do was enable SSH. And you can do that actually by creating a file. Like you create a blank file on the root file system on your root file system on your SD card, and when the Raspberry Pi boots up, it sees that file and enables SSH for you. If you check the link in the description, you'll find this document with all these details. And I have a couple other links for setting up DHCP and DNS bind. There are more details on these other guides that I wrote, but yeah, you'll find this guide that I wrote if you check the link in the description. And I have some more details on this here if you want to read this file for yourself. But anyways, I'm going to go over everything I did here. This guide just documents everything I did, but also I'm going to log into the server here and show you what I did. So I'm going to actually show you the configs. So I'm going to log into this, and I called it Banyan, like a banyan tree. That's just what I chose to name my server. So there we go, logged into that. So anyways, we had to enable SSH. You could do it by just putting a file in the SD card ahead of time, or you could also do it this way using system CTL, which is what I did this time. You could do it either way though. So one of the first things I did before installing DHCP or DNS was to set up a static IP. Now this was a little bit different than a regular Ubuntu. I'm not sure if these days how it's done in Debian. I assume it's the same, but this is different from Ubuntu. I assume standard Debian is probably similar to what we're getting here on Raspberry Pi OS, because Raspberry Pi OS is based on Debian. It used to be called Raspbian. Now they just call it Raspberry Pi OS. Anyways, so it feels a little bit weird because it's not using NetPlan and it's not using the old interfaces file. Either case, so it's yet another way of doing it. So you actually use DHCP to set up a static IP address, which just feels really, really weird, but I guess it's how things are being done. Any case, so first thing I did was to set up a static IP address, and I did that in etc DHCP cd.conf. Now note, this isn't DHCPD.conf, it's DHCP cd.conf. So there's an extra C in there. This is for the DHCP client, not for the DHCP server. Anyways, let's take a look at what's in this file. And it has a lot of things that aren't incredibly important to look at right now, but the important things are what you see at the bottom here. Interface ETH0, static IP address, routers, domain name servers. So I put itself right here, but in, falling back to Google. Anyways, so configured a static IP like that, rebooted just to make sure. And then we installed the DHCP server, which was really, really easy. So you just do an apt update and to make sure your repo is up to date and you have the latest info about what packages are available. And then you do a sudo apt install isc-dhcp-server. Now, if you want these commands, just check the link in the description. It'll bring you to this guide, and you can basically just copy paste these commands if you like. Now, after installing this, I had an error. I believe this is in the logs, and also if you check the status of the service. So basically, it's you'll get this error, and it's nothing to worry about. If you see an error like this, good chance it's probably it's basically that the config files aren't in place yet. So you'll get that error until you put the config files in. You can check the status using sudo systemctl status isc dhcp server. Any case, first config file was this one right here, isc dhcp server. So you can look inside that, and basically just specifies the interface to use. And second config file has a whole lot more stuff in it. Let's see here. All right, so this was just to get started, and you could also you could define you could actually explicitly map an IP address to a MAC address to an IP address if you want. Now, this guide just details how I set up my Raspberry Pi DNS and DHCP servers, but if you look at these links here at the top, it'll take you to my guide on DHCP and DNS and give you more details on those. Like if you look at this DHCP guide, it shows you here, this is how you might set up a host where you want to map you want a specific host to get a specific IP address. You can map the MAC address to the IP address like that, but that's not something I did here. I will probably be doing that as I set up labs and stuff. But in any case, everything just works dynamically now. And one thing to note about this is I have two ranges. So anything from 150 to 180 and then 190 to 250 can be picked and assigned to a host. The reasons it's set up that way, it's basically just because of how I set up my network, and I happen to have some hosts there that I didn't want to move around, and those were just good ranges to choose. I may rearrange this again in the future. Anyways, so set up that basic configuration. Configure. You're going to put your subnet here, netmask. Domain name server. It's going to be, we're going to be using our own domain. This is the host we're on. We're setting DHCP up on this and our DNS server on the same host. And that's, just fill in your own network information here, pick your own range, and mostly you can copy everything else other than the IP addresses. Just make sure that's all unique for your network. And then you can stop and start it like this, and check the status like this. So let's take a look at what the status looks like. All right, so this is the server running. Systemd has it running, and it tells you it's active, running. And let's see, what else does it tell you? Yeah, so a few things about writing leases files and stuff like that. No big deal. Basically, we can check this. This is how we can tell the status of the daemon and stuff with systemd. Anyways, that's that. That's pretty easy to do. Now for DNS bind, this is a little bit more involved. If you haven't run it already, you're going to want to run sudo apt update to get the latest repo info. Then we install a few packages, bind9 utils, and bind9 doc. If I wanted to, you couldn't exclude bind9 doc probably, but you may as well include it. I believe that probably contains man pages. But yeah, I would just install all three of those. And there's this file, etc default bind9, and I believe this is where you just tell it to use IPv4 only, unless you are using IPv6. So that's what it looks like. There's other stuff in here, but we're basically just changing this one line, right? And restart, you probably don't need to restart it at this point, but I did, and you might want to do it just to be sure, but it doesn't matter. You're going to restart again later. So then you're going to do a sudo do make mkdir etc bind zones to create a directory for your zone files. So that directory looks like this. So it has two zone files for forward and reverse. We're going to take a look at those in a bit. So we have this config file here named conf options. You have most of your options here. So let's take a look at this. This is actually kind of interesting. So one thing you do need to do is set up an ACL, unless you just assign everything to, unless you just allow queries for anything. Now, I actually had only included it's this server itself in the ACL initially, and had it set to allow recursion. Now, that basically no hosts could run queries against this DHCP, against this DNS server. So basically, if you want anything on this network, you can specify the network you want to be able to query, or you could specify a list of exact hosts you want to allow to query this. I specified the whole network, and I used this ACL. I named it trusted. So you could also just specify, I believe you can specify any, and I believe that's supposed to be a default ACL, like a built-in ACL. If you just say any, you can allow anyone to query it, and you wouldn't have to define this ACL here. Anyways, you want to allow queries, and if you allow recursion, I believe that also allows you to run any queries, but maybe not vice versa. In any case, I included both of these, so you can do regular queries and recursive queries using this ACL. And listening on, specify the interface that we're going to listen on. We're not allowing transfers because we don't need this to be transferred to other zone DNS servers. We have these forwarders. So when this DNS server doesn't know the IP for a host or vice versa, it's going to look them up from Google's DNS servers. So these are two of Google's DNS servers, which are trustable, more trustable than probably any ISP's DNS servers. So I use those, and so anything not on my local network, basically you're gonna use these to look it up. Anyways, that's the important stuff. Otherwise, set up the file similar to this, like what I did. This is how I set it up. Let's see. So we also have a named conf local. So we might want to take a look at this one too. This essentially just tells you where. If you look at this, it tells you where your zone files are, and that's it. That's basically what it does. It defines two zone files that we have. So if we want to actually look at those zone files, that's where all the important info really resides. So let's first take a look at this reverse zone file. This helps you resolve IPs into host names. So you'll notice here We just specify the name server, then an A record or rather a PTR record for this server itself, and then everything else on the network. These are mappings. So it basically knows this is on the 192.168 network, and it's on the 3. So you put these last 2 octets on this side, then say in PTR in the host name. And you need a period at the end, or it's going to cause problems for you. And notice that these octets here are in reverse. So you would have 3.81. So the IP would really go 192.168.3.81 or 3.82 and so on. So that's how you specify. These. It's a little weird, but that's how bind works. So get out of here, and the other file is lab.net. Now these are forward lookups. So we just have host names, and and we also have an A record for this server itself, but we have host names that map out to IP addresses. And here we just put the full IP just like that. And yeah, it's relatively straightforward, I guess. Now each of these files has a serial number up here. So anytime you make a change to this file, you need to also increment the serial number before you restart bind. Otherwise, bind won't pick up the changes. So if you forget to do that, you could be wondering, what am I doing wrong? Why are my changes not getting picked up, and drive yourself crazy? So remember to update that serial number. All right, so that's the reverse lookups and forward lookups. So we just looked at those 2 zone files. If you want to copy and paste these, remember, check the link in the description. It'll lead you to this page. Verify the config files don't contain any syntax errors. So if you want to verify that these config files are valid, you can run these 3 commands. You can say, just run a checkconf in general. Then you can specify the checkconf to run each of these. You specify the domain and the network and the zone files for each of those, and it's going to validate them for you and let you know if there are any syntax errors, which is good to know ahead of time. Then at this point, restart bind, and then install some DNS utilities, just because they're useful to be able to look things up and stuff. This is how you get the ns lookup command also. And here we just run a couple test queries: nslookup tiger.lab.net and nslookup this IP address. So let's try these out. There we go. It tells us it's using this server, and it's looking up this IP address. And you can do the reverse of that. Whoops. How did I not get that? All right, there you go. So there's the reverse of it. This IP address resolves to this host name. So if you have any issues with these not being picked up, just try incrementing the serial number and restart. So increment the serial number, restart bind, and hopefully it'll pick them up if it looks like it's not picking them up. So the other thing I did was I set the host name. So I set the host name to Banyan1, and I did that in the etc hostname file, and also I did that in etc hosts. So let's take a look here. etc hostname, just literally just put your host name there. And in etc hosts, I put the actual name I wanted here, in here, and there we go. And that basically sets everything up. That will get your host name set up. You're gonna want to bounce the host, but that's basically everything I did. That's everything I did to set up my DNS DHCP server on a Raspberry Pi. So if you found this video interesting or helpful at all or useful, give me a thumbs up. If you know something I don't know, leave a comment down below. Any questions, comments, criticisms, anything you want to say, just leave a comment down below. I want to hear it. Most likely I want to hear whatever you have to say. You might want to hit that subscribe button. We have a lot more content like this where we're doing servers, we're doing coding, networking, 3D printing, robots, Raspberry Pis, single board computers. Basically just a ton of tech related stuff, hardware and software, just a lot of interesting stuff you're not going to want to miss. So hit the subscribe button and also hit the bell icon. Otherwise YouTube's probably not going to even let you know when we come out with a new video. So you're not going to want to miss that stuff. So hit both the subscribe button and that bell icon. That said, hopefully you found this useful. Hopefully you found this interesting. But that's it for today. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.